Mexico, one of the busiest places to be for spring break. And Arizonans, we go to Puerto Vallarta, we go to Rocky Point, we go to Cabo. And a lot of people might be kind of second guessing, maybe are a little nervous to travel after what's happened.
Well, this week we talked quite a bit about the 4 Americans who were kidnapped over south of Brownville, Texas, and 2 of them died. Very tragic situation there. So there was a lot of talk about these travel advisories from the State Department, but I wanted to dive deeper into what the State Department actually says and really explain, because I keep getting emails from a lot of people about whether it's really safe to go down to Mexico. So here's how they break it down in this color-coded map, which you may have seen in red, orange, and yellow. And the State Department does this for every country in the world, assigns each country a color that corresponds with a risk level. Mexico's unique in that they break it down on a state-by-state basis. So it's red, orange, yellow, depending on which state you're going to in Mexico. And this is something I didn't know, learned this week. I thought there were like 10 or 12 states in Mexico. There are 32 states that make up Mexico. 6 of them are labeled red for do not travel, 7 labeled orange for reconsider your travel to those states, and 17 are labeled yellow with increased caution, travel with increased caution. So I want to break it down by some of our favorite spots, beginning with the closest spot, 3.5 hours south of us, is Rocky Point in the state of Sonora, which is orange colored for reconsider travel to Rocky Point, according to the State Department. But if you dive deeper into their advisory, they're talking about the entire state of Sonora due to crime and kidnapping in the state, not in Rocky Point. And in fact, if you really read it, they say you should be fine on the highway between southern Arizona and Rocky Point, just an hour drive. And if you stay in and around the Rocky Point tourist areas and the beautiful beaches there, especially driving in daylight, you should be just fine to go to Rocky Point. The advisory is really beyond Rocky Point, traveling and driving around in the rest of the state of Sonora. Down farther south, Puerto Vallarta, also in an orange zone in the state of Jalisco. Okay, so this is another one where they're saying reconsider your travel to the state of Jalisco. But Puerto Vallarta is fine. They say gang activity in the state, but not necessarily in the touristy areas of Puerto Vallarta. They're really talking more about some gang-on-gang violence, which has happened in Guadalajara, which is also in the state of Jalisco in Mexico. So you're fine if you're going to Puerto Vallarta if you already have those plans. The one outlier here, if you want to consider it that, it would be Mazatlan, because that's in the state of Sinaloa. That's in the red zone up there. Oh, I forgot this board's working when you touch it again. Okay, so Sinaloa is in a red zone where they're saying do not travel to the state of Sinaloa due to drug cartel activity and kidnapping there. But again, they're really talking about outside this touristy area of Mazatlan. There was an incident in Mazatlan in January where they closed the airport for a couple days because that happened kind of after El Chapo's son was captured there, and the gangs and the cartels started firing on each other. But again, they weren't targeting tourists in Mazatlan, but this is the one touristy area which is in a red zone right now. And they're really talking about, they don't want Americans driving down the coast from Mazatlan down to Puerto Vallarta. It's about 275 miles down, and they don't want people making that drive on their own. Mexico City is an upgrade. This is in a yellow zone, so Mexico City is kind of a dot there right under the map. And this is exercise increased caution. But Mexico City, huge city, you would exercise increased caution whether you're going to New York or Seattle or Chicago, anywhere, due to possible crime and violence in Mexico City. And again, they say outside the touristy areas, so you're fine if you want to go to Mexico City. And Cancun and Tulum, these are arguably the most popular destinations for Americans on the Yucatan Peninsula here. These are yellow as well for increased caution due to crime and violence. Now, Cancun did have a problem, cartel versus cartel violence, back in December of 21. That was largely caused by tourists from America and Canada, the U.S. and Canada, I should say, buying drugs from their resorts. They would have different drug dealers show up to the resorts and have a turf war over who was going to supply the visiting Americans with drugs. So that's what was happening December of 2021. They brought in a lot of extra police, and they actually deployed the National Guard to restore safety there as well. So you're fine if you want to go to Cancun or Tulum. In fact, the Yucatan is drivable. It's probably the safest place for Americans to visit in all of Mexico. You are good to go. Also, just by comparison, you see most of Mexico's yellow for increased caution. Look at Europe. Europe is yellow too. The same thing, exercise increased caution. France, Italy, Germany, Spain, and the United Kingdom, all yellow due to the threat of terrorism and also civil unrest. And you could say the same about any city in the United States as well. And the last thing here, these concerns have not impacted the numbers. The numbers are huge. This is from Mexico, the month of January. 5 million international tourists, most of them Americans, 32% increase over last year. That's a huge jump. 13% more tourists going to Mexico than pre-pandemic levels. So despite the concerns that we have, I guess, that we talk about here in the media about safety concerns in Mexico, nothing really has changed. And they rank Mexico the same as they do most of Europe. So that just put it in perspective. And again, you travel wherever you feel comfortable. If you don't feel comfortable, that's totally fine. You go where you want to go based on your own concerns and safety concerns.
But most of the states, they're not saying the State Department do not go.
Right.
They're just saying be cautious.
The touristy areas are fine because the cartels fight amongst themselves. They really aren't targeting Americans.
Interesting stuff, Jared. Thanks for breaking it all down.